This one huge pitfall most everybody falls into on their path of personal or spiritual development. That's what I'm going to talk about, and it's very sneaky. This one, if you haven't caught my video about the inner critic, I recommend you go check that one out after this one. It's very good because it's very similar, and I'm going to reference some of that material. So, what is this one pitfall that most every single person falls into on their development? It is dehumanization. And so let me explain that a little bit, and what this personal development is that I'm talking about. So first of all, this personal development, I view personal development as spiritual development and ego development and character development. It's all set. It's not separate to me. It's all one thing. Um, and so there's different models for this, but basically in psychology, there's a lot of different ways to articulate how the ego develops and how we've developed over our lifetime. And one of the ego developmental theories that's relatively new has 9 different stages. I'm not going to cover all of those, but basically it goes from separation all the way up into unity consciousness. And people in the unity framework is like 1%. So that you call these unicorns. And most people kind of like sit in this middle of this particular theory. And one of the traps that we have in this personal development is dehumanizing other people. Because everybody is a mirror for ourselves in how we can develop from ourselves. And so in personal development, there is 4 laws of human behavior. And the first law is everybody is suffering and insecure. That means that everybody is carrying around fear, anxiety, grief, trauma, disconnection, or shame, something along those lines, a mix of those to varying different degrees depending on the person and their journey. And the second law of human behavior is everybody's wearing a mask, right? We create these personas for ourselves to interact with the tribe, if you will, or the rest of humanity. And that is not a real thing. That's fictitious. It's this character that we put on to basically not die. Because if we were to get thrown out of the tribe, that would be bad for us. So it's all ingrained into these traits were passed down from our ancestors, basically. And the third law is everybody is pretending not to wear a mask. So we all go around wearing these masks, and we all know we're wearing masks, but yet we're going to not talk about the mask that we're wearing. And so everybody's wearing these masks. And then the fourth law is everybody you meet is a product of childhood suffering and reward, right? So pain and pleasure, however you want to phrase that. And because everybody's walking around in these particular states with this mask on, we're not really seeing reality. So where does dehumanization come in to all of this? When we start to throw around labels to a person and we see the label before we see a human being, that's dehumanization. And that is the pitfall that we fall into as human beings that most people aren't even aware of that stunts our growth, basically, to get up to, and what we like to call here in Consciously Awesome, the evolved ego, because the ego is our amigo. And there's not really any way to get rid of the ego. It's part of the human dynamic. So it's nothing that we can kill off or we can relieve ourselves from. We can evolve it and we can change it and we can grow it. And we can, instead of deny ourselves or try to disidentify with things, we actually can take the opposite approach and we can say to ourselves, how do I identify more with more of reality instead of less of reality, right? And this is where the ego moves into those later states of unifying consciousness or oneness, right? So the lens at which a person with this ego would view the world is very pure. And some of the things that jumps in front of that is dehumanization. So, an example that I had in my life that came up within the last couple of years. I mean, it's everywhere, but within my family chat, the phrase "red pilly" was thrown around, and I had to step in, and I was very upset about that. And so I was like, hey, look, when we use these terms like red pilly, or it doesn't matter what term it is, there's a lot of terms we can use. Um, that actually dehumanizes the other person on the end of this. Like we're stepping away from looking at a human being who is a product of childhood suffering and reward, who's wearing a mask just to survive in this world, who's carrying around a lot of, we'll just call it, we'll paraphrase it as fear in their body. And so all of these layers are going to dictate the behavior. And so the more filters we place upon a human being, right? These are labels. The farther removed we are from our natural state of being and our expanded, unified ego with the rest of the world. So, if we want to move forward in our human development to be the most evolved human we can possibly be, it's to identify with more and not less, right? And this is very tricky because if you are in any type of dichotomy, and I would be really surprised if you're not, it's 2026, and there's a whole lot of that going around in the last 10 years. It's always been here, but it's definitely at the surface a lot with all the algorithms and all of this kind of stuff. So if you prescribe to any particular tribe or brand and you're opposing another brand per se, or tribe or ethnicity, or maybe you're uh, a native to a country, I'll use the term loosely, and there's people who are not native called immigrants coming into your country, and you're labeling them as such, you're removing the human aspect from them. And this works all the way up to politicians, like, oh, that's how politicians are. I'm definitely guilty of this myself. Like, it's a very hard trap to get out of because we're mired in the language of dehumanization. It's definitely a language trap. And the language filters over the brain and removes us from reality even more. So even a politician is a person, right? They have all of these same traits. They're a product of childhood suffering and reward. They're wearing a mask. They're pretending not to, and they're carrying around a lot of fear, just doing the best they can with what they have. And when they can do better, they will do better. And not everybody gets to that point where we can do better. So that's the big trap, is language and how it gets in front of reality. So our brains, this is evolution. It categorizes stuff. It pulls out of its memory bank. It looks at a situation and it tries to figure out as quickly as possible if it's seen that situation before. And then it pulls up as close as it possibly can to that particular situation to make sure the human body, right, the vessel, is safe. So I would never have anybody step out of their better judgment and their intuition and all of this kind of stuff to remove themselves from danger. So that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is personal development, ego development, and spiritual development. Because when we start sticking these labels and othering people, that's another good word for it, or just saying the government or they, all these broad terms, we're just dehumanizing people. We're not seeing people for who they are as a person first, right? And my little nephew, he is 6 and he loves people. He loves strangers. This is, most children will run up to other people, whether it doesn't matter what age they are, if they're little people, elderly people, adult people, man, woman, it doesn't matter what color they are. They just love people. Why? Because they haven't been trained not to love people anymore. They don't have that filter. They don't have the language getting in front of reality for them, right? And so they don't have the fear bestilled upon them that the rest of our culture has within it. There's reasons for this. I'm not saying that there's not good reasons to have to be safe, right? But when we're talking about evolution and creating a more harmonic being for ourselves in a more harmonic world, more cooperative world that doesn't um, continue into subjugating itself, right? That cycle of abuse that has been going on forever. We need to really sit back and ask ourselves, am I seeing a human being first? Or am I seeing labels first? Right. And more often than not, if you're not practicing a meditation or mindfulness, or you're not constantly aware of your thoughts and projections out into the situation, it's really easy to get caught into that trap in real life. With social media, it makes it a zillion times worse. So the practice here is to be mindful. If you have some labels that come up, it doesn't matter what situation there is. I know there's a lot in here in the United States right now. There's a lot of political division, we'll say. And if you're on one side of the other of that fence and they trigger you and you're not looking at a human being first, there's room to grow, right? I'm not saying that you have to agree with the other side. What I'm saying is let's look at humans first and then work our way up, right? Work our way out from there. So when we look at the labels, those trigger reaction within ourselves. A lot of times we're super reactive, we get defensive, our nervous systems go crazy, maybe even fight or flight, anger sinks into the body. And this is where I'm going to refer to that other video, is when all of these things happen, we're actually creating a lot of stress in our own system. And that stress is not healthy. It actually creates a weaker immune system, and it also keeps us in a contracted state, so we can't be creative. We actually, when we get into those those trigger moments, when we look at labels first and not people and not situations, and when we're not seeing as close to reality as possible, then all of this information floods over our system because it's pre-programmed, it's already wired, it's automatic to keep us safe. And the cycle continues because we can't just objectively take a look at actually what's happening. And we can't look at another human being and say, oh, this human being, you know what? They probably have a lot in common with me. They probably want food for themselves. They want a good place to stay. They want a good education for their family. They want to be safe, right? And we all have loss. We all have grief. We will all lose something. We will all lose someone. There's so much we have in common with each other. So much grief do we have in common. It might, the elements of loss might look different, but the pain is all the same. The pain is all real, and we all share that. So there's so much we share in common, and we're all really just trying to do the best we can to come to those. Not everybody wants to be zillionaires. Not everybody wants to do that. I would argue that most people don't want to do that. And I would argue that that is a sickness that is promoted by the system that we keep perpetuating in our lives, in our culture. So the reasons why we want to stop dehumanizing people is so we feel more confident, more calm, more proactive or response able to situations, so we can go about our life in a much more peaceful way to actually create more peace in our life, create more harmony in our life. The less reactive we are and the more response able, or just the ability to listen, or just to like get as close to reality as possible. Maybe smile at some people, make some eye contact without the labels that you might have had before. It's not for the other person's benefit originally. It is, but it's for our own benefit. So we don't carry that stress and that anxiety, because all of these labels, all of these thoughts, all of these judgments, when we other people, when we say it's red pilly or blue pilly or woke or All the other terms, all of them. It's 2026. There's so many, or young people versus old people. The generationalism, that's another one. It's like, uh, it's crazy how many isms that we have to get in the way of reality. And so when we do this, we stunt our own growth. That's the bottom line. So if you want to continue to stunt your own growth, I recommend continuing to dehumanize people. However, if you're watching this, I don't think that's where you're at in your life. I feel like you would prefer to have more harmony, more peace, and cooperation in your own life, in your own direct experience, right? And so when we stop and we pause, we can let our pre-programmed disposition run, but we just watch it and we don't have to agree with it. And we go, okay, let's take a step back. Let's just see what's really happening here. Oh, this is a person. That's it, right? They're just walking by. Or this is a person, and we can tell whatever story we want, but it doesn't have to be the ones that are automatically preloaded to create this chain reaction of stress within our systems. And when we do that, we allow ourselves to have an opening to expand our creativity and to open up to the possibility that we're all in this planet, on this planet together, trying to do this the best we can. And really, from my perspective, most people, not all people, we have psychopaths among us, but most people really just want to take care of each other and do the thing that's going to be the most loving and bring the most joy. And that's not what you're going to find on the news. That's not what you're going to find in headlines. But that, to me, is more real than anything else that you'll find. I worked the census during the 2016 to 2020 cycle, and I would go door to door. I live in a very conservative place, and there was a lot of people that would be like, you have a lot of courage in this time to knock on people's doors and try to talk to them. And they were right. And I just really did the best I could to explain that most people are good and most people want to help. And that most people are really, they don't want to fight. They don't want to do all this nonsense that we see in the media and in the headlines. That's not, think about the little kids. That's more natural than how adults behave, which is more normal because it's been conditioned into us. So as you go about your days, just remember that there's 4 laws of human behavior. Everybody is suffering or insecure, means we're carrying around fear, anxiety, grief, trauma. We're feeling isolation or shame. We're all wearing this persona that's not real, so we can do this song and dance so everybody likes us, right, and gets along with us, or we can get what we need or what we want. And then we pretend that we don't wear this mask. Everybody ignores it. And then that everybody you meet is a product of childhood suffering or reward, pleasure or pain. And with that, everybody's doing the best they can. And these labels of dehumanizing, they're so subtle. These isms, they remove the human. And when we remove the human element, that's when violence can happen, right? The system that is in place encourages dehumanization, so there's violence. It's very hard to get another human being to actually commit violence against another human being or fight. You have to be in a lot of pain and under a lot of extreme pressure to want to do. It's not a natural phenomenon, is what I'm saying. And so the system, as in the paradigm that we live in, is one of isolation, or separation theology is what I like to call it. And that's the core issue of all of this. So when we go from separation to oneness or harmony, as in there's one earth, there's one humanity, we're all in this together, we got to share, otherwise it's not going to look good. It's going to be a rough journey. But when we can remove those labels first, make sure we're not in a dangerous situation, it's a lot more peaceful to just be in your own body, enjoy yourself, and enjoy those around you. So I'll leave you with this today, and may you be blessed with less dehumanization in your brain and in your life for more harmony. And so it is.